Welcome to this Crown Council webinar entitled I Quit, Creating an Accountable, Harmonious Team. This is Steve Anderson, and we're excited to share with you this information. We're in listen-only mode. You're welcome to submit any questions at any time, and we will deal with those at the end of the webinar. So by the time we get done today, we'll have addressed some specific things that you can do individually as well as a team together to create a more harmonious team that works better together, that's able to serve patients in the way that you've always wanted to serve them. For starters, we'd like to congratulate everyone listening today. Everybody will remember back, if you're a dentist, when you graduated from dental school, or if you're a team member when you launched your career and got your first job in dentistry, how excited you were about the prospects of going into one of the greatest professions that there is. In fact, in the latest study that was done by U.S. News and World Report that ranked the best professions, being a dentist was ranked #1. So you did a pretty good job in your decision making. Hygienist was ranked as the 5th best profession to be in that there is, and so dentistry overall outranks all other professions in terms of its quality of life, pay, balance, and ability to make a difference. So congratulations on choosing a great profession. Think back to that time when you first came into dentistry with your hopes and dreams and everything that you were excited about doing. In fact, if you're like most, you had a vision of what the ideal job or what the ideal practice was going to be like. If you were a dentist, you had a vision of where you were going to practice, what kind of practice you wanted to have, the amazing team that you were going to hire, what hours you were going to work. All of those specifics, you had a great vision of what it was going to be like. If you don't have that vision, you should. Everybody has, of course, those things that they looked forward to. If you're a team member, you had the vision of the perfect dentist that you were going to work for, in the perfect office and the perfect team members, and how supportive the work environment was going to be. You had it all figured out. In fact, if you're a team member or a dentist, it was kind of like dreaming about the perfect date, the perfect spouse, and you had it all figured out exactly what they were going to be like before you ever went on the first date. Well, that's kind of how it is when we first start out. And when you started interviewing for your job, or dentist, when you started interviewing for your first team members, there's an interesting dynamic that takes place. In fact, more often than not, if we're not careful, we make the other person on the other side of the desk fit this ideal profile that we've been dreaming of. The dentist makes the prospective new hire into the employee that they've always been looking for and that they've always wanted, and this prospective team member makes the office, the practice, and the dentist into the perfect fit, the perfect place to work. It's easy to say yes, yes, yes on the front end when you're interviewing to all the things that are asked of you, the hours that you're willing to work, the things you're willing to do. Easy to say yes to just about everything, and it's easy for a dentist to make all the accommodations and say yes, we do this, and yes, we do that, and yes, this is a great place to work. And the mistake that's often made is that a dentist sometimes thinks that they can change the person they're interviewing after they come to work. A team member often thinks they can change the dentist. Well, you know, he looks like a great dentist, or she looks like a great dentist. There are a couple of things, but I'm sure I can change him into the person I want. Or the dentist thinks, well, there are a few things that were, that might be a problem, like the 10 earrings, the nose ring, and the tongue ring, but I'm sure we can get her to take them out when we hire her. Now, I'm being facetious, kind of, but not really. It's easy to deceive ourselves in the interview process and think that we've found the ideal person, and then once the team has been hired, or you hire on to the office, it's the happy team, everything's going to be wonderful, and everybody goes to work. Then reality sets in. Things don't always go, in fact, rarely do they ever go exactly as planned. You start working, and pretty soon you notice the little sidebar meetings that start cropping up, comments about bad behavior, someone slights you, there's requests for unscheduled time off, someone gets mad about having to go through training or go through extra CE, or they don't want to take time for CE, someone's late for work, someone has to leave early, somebody else doesn't want to learn anything new, and before you were hired, if you're a team member, if you think back, it was I do, I do, I do. I do everything. Yes, I'm willing to do all that. And if you're not careful, after you're on board, more often than not, it's I don't, I don't, I don't. I don't clean treatment rooms. I don't schedule appointments. That's not my job. So it might be time to pause on both sides, both for the dentist and for the team member, and ask yourself this question. What if you were to have said during the interview, whether you were interviewing a prospective team member or you were being interviewed, what if you had said during the interview things that you have heard yourself say after the hire decision was made down the road? Let me say that again. What if you were to have said during the interview some of the things that you have said now after the hire decision has been made? Whether you're the team member, have you said things that never would have flown during the job interview? Or if you're a dentist, have you said things to your team members that if you had said that during the job interview, there's no way they would have ever come to work for you? Bottom line here is it's a good idea to contemplate from time to time what would happen if you had to try out for your job all over again. If you had to apply for your job today, now that the office, the doctor, the team, everyone knows what they know now, would you be the person for the job? Are you today the person that you represented yourself to be during the hiring process? It goes both ways, whether you're the doctor or the team member. To what degree are you the person that interviewed when you originally interviewed for the job or were interviewing people for the job? Food for thought. As you think about that, there's really three things to consider. First is, what's your vision? What is it that you really envisioned when you went to the work for the office, or if you're the dentist, what's your vision of what you want your practice to be like? The ideal work environment, the patients you want to see, the type of work environment that you want to have in your office. Second is, how clear are you with yourself, and how clear have you been with the people you work with about that vision and what you really want the place that you work in to be like? Third is your purpose. Excuse me. Why are you there? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And to what degree, again, have you been clear with your fellow teammates about what your vision is, your purpose, why you're there, and what's really important to you? When you combine that vision and your purpose with that clarity with yourself and clarity with the people that you work with, that is a formula for success. So let's take a look for a moment about your expectations. Step number one, get clear on your expectations. Whether you're the team member or the dentist, the same rule applies. Are your expectations of each other, of the practice and your work environment, are they realistic? And have you been honest with your fellow teammates and team members with your dentist and dentists with your team as to what you expect and when you expect it? Have you been clear, and have you been honest? Or do you have any unspoken expectations that are frustrating you because you haven't verbalized them? So, for example, for the dentist, do you expect your team to show up on time? How clearly have you defined what it means, and how often have you clarified it? That's just one very simple example. Team members, were you honest in your interview about your limitations, about what you are able to do, and willing to do. If not, it may be time to come clean or change your limitations to match what you promised to do in terms of work hours, continuing education, and tasks. If something has changed, Dennis, if something's changed in your vision and your expectations that hasn't been clearly verbalized, it's time to come clean and get clear. Team members, if something's changed in what you're able to do and your limitations, have you clearly explained that and sat down and made it clear? It usually is a mismatch of expectations that is the biggest place where teams run off track, where disharmony creeps in. So again, step number one, get clear on your expectations. Team members with the rest of your team and your dentist with your team. What are your expectations in terms of behavior, work hours, tasks, everything that needs to be done? Now, let me suggest in the hiring process that there are 3 documents that will clarify expectations up front that every team member should be privy to before they say yes to the job. Number one, everybody's pretty familiar with, which is a job description. A job description clearly outlines what the tasks are that are involved with that particular job. The second document that a team member should be privy to is the results for which that position is accountable. So what are the specific results that I will be accountable for if I accept this position? For example, if I'm working in the front office, then one of the results that I might be accountable for would be 98% collections, or a schedule that produces at least X number of dollars a day, a hygiene schedule that minimizes no-shows and cancellations with a minimum number of, and even a specific definition of what that expectation is. What are the results that that position is accountable for? And if I accept the job, then I know that I'm then taking on the accountability for those results. So first document is the job description. The second document is a document that specifically outlines the results I'm accountable for. The third is one that we've talked about for years in the Crown Council, which is called a culture guide. Culture guide is the behavioral norms that are expected of the team members on our team. Culture guide would include things like showing up early for team meetings, how you interact with each other, what behavior is expected. There's actually a sample culture guide at crowncouncil.org, which you can just, in the search bar, just search for culture guide. And there's a sample culture guide you can download and edit to make fit your team. So those are the 3 documents that we suggest that make expectations very clear up front. Job description, results that position is accountable for, and the culture guide. So if time has passed and those 3 documents don't exist for the current team that's in place, it's never too late to go ahead and create those 3 documents, the job description, the results that each position is accountable for, and the culture guide, and have a clear discussion with everybody on the team about those 3 areas. Making sure that expectations are clear is the first step toward great team harmony and working better together. Next is the principle of accountability. Now there's a big difference between responsibility and accountability. Let me draw the contrast. If you break down the word responsibility, response able, that means that you are able to respond. Everybody on the team is responsible for just about everything. Everybody on the team is responsible for happy patients. Everybody on the team is responsible for keeping the office clean. You are responsible. You're able to respond to requests for help. Accountability is something related but totally different in its aspect. Break the word down. Account able. you are able to give account for an end result. Accountability for those specific results is one of the keys to having a well-managed, harmonious team. There are two ingredients. One, if I'm accountable, then there are specific times set aside when I know that I will give an account of my results for which I'm accountable. And number two, I get feedback on a regular basis. So here's a couple of action items, which is, one, what kind of feedback system do you have in place once the results have been identified for which I'm accountable and my job description is clear and the culture guide is in place? Then are there specific calendared times for feedback, and do I get feedback on a regular basis, not just from the leader of the practice, but from other team members as well? Every 6 months, there should be a sit down that doesn't have anything to do with compensation. It's not a performance appraisal. Let me clear that up. We're not in the market of putting a value on each other and then selling each other. That's what you do when you appraise someone, or something, you put a value on it so you can sell it. Well, this isn't a performance appraisal. It's simply a time to sit down and review all the feedback and get an update on the specific areas of accountability. Now, it doesn't matter how long you've been with the practice, everybody lives by the same rules. The apple goes bad in the bunch when accountability goes out the window and somebody thinks they don't have to abide by the same rules that everyone else does. If behavior, results, or tasks go unaddressed with no accountability, what happens? Well, it's the same thing that happens if dental conditions go untreated. They decay, they rot, and disease happens. So here's the personal question. What's the standard that you're living up to? Or have you changed the rules and you think you're above what everybody else has to do? If you don't hold people accountable, then that's when the process starts to go bad. So, one, what's your feedback system? Do you get regular feedback? Do you have specific times when you sit down for feedback one-on-one? And one of our past Mentor of the Months in the Crown Council, Dr. Robert Rubin, who's a PhD professor in management, suggests this, that when you have a sit-down feedback session, that there should never be any surprises. And when you sit down every 6 months or every 3 months, it should simply be a review of all the feedback that you've already received. It's a review of your accountability and your behavior and your results. So feedback should be given on a regular basis, not saved up for some sit-down meeting, but when you do sit down, it is a review of all of that feedback. At the end of the day, you, whoever you are, team member or dentist, you're responsible to hold yourself accountable for the results that you've agreed to. That's your key. Are you personally accountable, and can you give an account for the results that you've agreed to? A couple of other ingredients here to increase the total effectiveness of the team. Feedback, critically important. Recognition or acknowledgement of a job well done or the results as they come in, absolutely important. And then having some type of incentive where everyone has a stake in the game are three of the critical ingredients. So accountability is one of the huge keys. What's your accountability system, and what is it that you're doing on a regular basis to give feedback and do the things that you need to do to hold everybody accountable and hold each person on the team accountable? Next is support and follow-up. Every team needs to work on the team, not just in the practice. There's a big difference. Every day you go to work and you work in the practice. You work with patients, you bill, you collect, you do the dentistry. That's working in the practice. The best teams in the Crown Council, we find, set the time aside to work on the team, to work on teamwork, to work on team harmony and how you function together as a team. So what are you doing to work on your team? What's your regular schedule of team meetings? Do you have a regular morning meeting? Do you have a weekly meeting? What training meetings do you have that are calendars and scheduled? How do you raise the expectation for performance in your practice? How do you build those relationships in the practice with each other? One of our favorite all-time mentors in the Crown Council is Larry Wilson, and we've used his analogy many times when he said that every organization needs a camping experience about every 90 days. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't mean you have to go camping, but what happens when you do go camping? Well, you have smoke in your eyes, you have dirt in your food, you don't sleep very well, you're either too hot or too cold, and you talk about that experience for months to come. In other words, when you go camping, it's a bonding experience. Every team needs a bonding experience on a regular basis so that they can pull together and work together as a team. So what do you do for camping experiences? What are the experiences you have outside the practice as a team? What training do you go to? What are the things that you do as a team to work on the team and work on your teamwork, not just in the practice? Second suggestion for support and follow-up is every team needs a coach. It's the coach's job to make sure that the team wins. A coach is usually someone highly skilled, very experienced, that can sit on the sidelines and objectively look at what's going on and then steer the team to a better strategy for success. A coach can be a mentor. It could be someone that you hire that is a not a full-time coach, but someone that periodically checks in with the team and can suggest and keep you on that track. But every team, every great team needs a great coach that will help the team move forward strategically in the direction where they want to go. Our team at the Total Patient Service Institute, our team of practice advisors, that's what they do every day, is coach teams to success. Every team member wants a great place to work. I've never met a prospective team member who said to me, Steve, I really don't care about the work environment. I don't care if I get abused. I really don't care about any of that stuff. Just pay me well and I'll put up with anything. I've never met a team member like that. Everybody, however, I have met has always said, yes, I would love a great work environment. Few people, though, recognize what it takes to have a great work environment and a great team. Great teams, you don't go to work on a great team, you bring a great team to your team. In other words, you bring the great place to work with you. It's the environment that you bring with you and what you contribute to the team that makes it a great place to work. Be the team member that you want to work with. Dentists, be the team member that you have always wished that you could hire. And team members, be the dentist that you want to work for. In other words, you bring to the table the kind of team that you want to be. Now, here's a quick little self-analysis, and this follows a general rule in business and in organizations, and it's what we call the 20-60-20 rule. Every organization follows this basic format. 20% of the people on the team cause 80% of the problems. 60% of the people on the team are, too good to fire, but not quite good enough to keep. They just kind of get by. And then there's 20% that make everything happen. Let's take a look at that. First is the middle 60%. The middle 60% of the team is characterized by those that do just enough to keep their job. They don't necessarily go out of their way to do more than is required, but they'll go down the checklist and do the things that they're asked to do. Now, here's an interesting thing. Years ago, I met Coach Bum Phillips, and Coach Phillips was one of the famous coaches of the Houston Oilers back when the Oilers were in Texas, and also the New Orleans Saints. And he had a great lesson that he taught me years ago when he said, Steve, there's only two kinds of players that I cannot coach. Those who won't do anything I ask them to do, and those who will only do what I ask them to do. And that kind of characterizes the challenges sometimes with the middle 60%. It's kind of a job. They clock in, they clock out, they take up space. And it's kind of like the dentist who said, well, bad help's better than no help at all. I know I could probably do better, but it's kind of a hassle to have to go find and train somebody else, so I'll just live with mediocrity. That's kind of the middle 60%. Next, and this is also a characteristic of the middle 60%, is they're always too busy. They're always busy, 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 busy. They'll tell you that they don't have time to do any more. They're busy on activity instead of accomplishment. And there's a big difference between those two things. Being busy is not the objective. Accomplishment and getting the result is the real key. So middle 60%ers will always tell you how busy they are, but that's not the goal. Let's talk about the lower 20%. Now, the lower 20% should probably be given an opportunity to make a career change yesterday. They usually have a lot going on in their personal life that gets dragged into the practice. They always have some drama going on that causes them to run late in the morning, a reason they have to leave early in the afternoon, a reason they have to take phone calls and interrupt during the day, reasons why they can't do what they're asked to do or why they can't do their job as outlined. They are the exception to every rule. And they're a drag on the practice. Everybody is always trying to cover for them because they're not even doing the bare minimum. The bottom 20% that cause 80% of the problems on the team. They tend to be pot stirrers. They have a unique ability of taking little things and blowing them out of proportion, and so they become huge emotional upsets in the practice. And you can always trace most of the emotional problems on the team back to that lower 20% that are constantly stirring it up. Finally is the top 20%. Now, the top 20% team members, they're the ones that make 80% of the things happen. They're focused on results, not activity. Again, they make 80% of the results happening. They're constantly growing. They're eager to learn. They embrace change. They take personal responsibility for their own professional development. They take personal responsibility for what happens in the office, and you can depend on them to make things happen. Now, let me paraphrase a famous quote that I think characterizes the top 20%. Top 20% team members and dentists have formed the habit of doing things that the bottom 20% and the middle 60% don't like to do. Let me say that again. The top 20% have formed the habit of doing things that the bottom 80% don't like to do. So what are the things that the bottom 80% don't like to do? Well, it's the very same things that the top 20% don't like to do. The difference is that the top 20% are committed to doing what they ought to do, when they ought to do it, whether they want to or not, with no debate. They just do it. Why? Because they're committed to pleasing results. Bottom 80% team members are committed to pleasing activities. Top 20%ers are committed to pleasing results. What are pleasing activities? Checking email, texting, checking Facebook, having pleasant conversations with each other, with patients, running out to grab something to eat. Those are pleasing activities. But top 20%ers are committed to pleasing results and doing the things that will create great results, making those continuing care calls, making sure the schedule is full, collecting, asking patients for treatment, asking them for referrals. They're committed to doing the things that will get them the results that they know they're accountable for. So that's the self-test. If you had to rate yourself, where do you land? Are you a top 20% team member, creating 80% of the results in the practice? Are you a middle 60%er kind of sitting on the fence, doing time? Or are you a bottom 20%er that's a drag on the practice? Where do you fit in that scale? 20, 60, 20. Every team has a 20, 60, 20. Where do you fit? Great teams have healthy relationships. And building healthy relationships starts with building relationships with each other and taking personal responsibility for your own problems and always trying out for the job on a regular basis. To what degree do you take personal responsibility for the work environment in your own practice? So, is there a best way? Yeah, your way is the best way. What is the best way that you can map out for bringing more harmony and more teamwork to the practice? It's time to take personal responsibility to map that out. So, how do you do that? Well, you start by saying, how can I help my team and my practice? What's your personal action plan for bringing the best to your practice? What changes do you need to make personally because you are where you are today as a team and personally by choice, not by chance? You've done everything you need to do exactly the way you need to do it in order to end up exactly where you are. So, as a quick review of some of the action items that we've talked about today, 1, what's your vision? What's your purpose? And how clearly have you communicated that to the rest of your team? Number 2, clarify expectations. Once you're clear with yourself on your vision and your purpose, sit down as a team and communicate that. That should lead off with the dentist by sitting down and saying, these are the expectations that I expect out of my practice. This is where we're going as a team. And these are the things we're going to do to get there. Sit down as a team and work on those 3 documents that everybody should have. Your job description, your description of the specific results for which you're accountable, and your culture guide. What are the behavioral norms that everyone in the practice agrees to? Work on those documents and live by them on a regular basis. That's what drives the practice. If everybody on the team will live with those 3 documents, then it will create more team harmony every day as you work together. What kind of support system do you have? What is your schedule for team meetings, continuing education, and camping experiences? Experiences where you can work on the team, not just in the office. Do you have that regular schedule of team meetings where you can sit down and work on the critical things that you need to do? Next is an inventory. Where do you land today? 20, 60, 20. Are you a top 20% team member? Are you a middle 60% team member? Or are you a bottom 20% team member? And is that where you want to be? And what do you need to do to make the changes to be in the place that you want to be? Your team has done everything it needs to do to be exactly in the spot where it is today. What are the changes you need to make personally and as a team? Get clear, clarify expectations, and if expectations have changed, that's okay. Life moves on, and everyone can adapt accordingly. I'll just give you a quick case study as an example. One team that went through this process recently to clarify expectations, and as they sat and discussed and the doctor clarified where the practice was going and what the expectations were, 2 team members within 24 hours quit because they realized they didn't fit the practice. Now, interestingly enough, they were bottom 20% team members. It's amazing what happens when you get clear on what your expectations are and clear on your vision, then it gives everyone the opportunity to make some decisions about whether they fit or whether they don't. So, clarify expectations and take personal responsibility for your area of the practice and what you contribute to the team. Now, with that, there are a couple of questions that we will address as we wrap up here.
I've got some, Steve.
Go
Thank
for
you very much. There are three. The first one is, I want to hire someone that would be a top 20%er. What do I look for, and how do I identify them?
Great question. So let me give you two interesting suggestions, one on both ends of the spectrum. On the top end of the spectrum, here's a general rule which says that the best indication of what someone will do in the future is what they've done in the past. Now, that's not a 100% rule, but it's a good general rule to live by. That will be more accurate than not. So if you want to know what kind of team member they will be, find out what kind of team member they've been. Now, there's the obvious ones, like how often have they changed jobs? If they've changed jobs every 6 months or every year, it's a pretty good indication that's probably what they'll keep doing. I would ask them about experiences they've had in previous offices. Ask them about their previous employers and ask a general question. Tell me about your previous employer. Tell me about your association with Dr. X where you used to work. And if they don't have anything good to say about their previous employer, you can bet that you're going to be the next one on the list that they won't have anything to say, good to say about. So best indication of what they'll do in the future is what they've done in the past. Do a very careful analysis of what they've done. Ask them, what kind of results were you able to accomplish or get in your previous work? And if they can't articulate what kind of results they got, then they're one that's probably a middle 60%er that just kind of clocks in and clocks out. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, how do you identify those that are going to be bad news? Well, I had an interesting experience recently with a company that has one of the highest retention rates of any company in its industry, and it happens to be in an industry where the turnover rate, the industry average, is 90%. 90% of the employees in this industry usually turn over every year, a high turnover rate. This particular company has a 90% retention rate. They reverse the ratios. How do they do it? Well, they have an extensive interviewing process where people have to try out to work in the company. But here is one of their secrets that they use, and one of the key identifiers. This is what they said, is that they know almost 100% of the time that in the interview process, if a potential employee shares too much information, TMI, that there's going to be a problem. If they don't know the line between professionalism and what's going on in their personal life, then they know there's going to be a problem. Let me give you a funny example. It wasn't funny at the time, but it illustrates. I was interviewing a prospective team member some time ago, and I noticed that on her resume was the office that is well known in that area for having high turnover. The dentist is well known for being very, very difficult to work for. And so I asked her, tell me about your experience in working for Dr. X. And she said, oh, it was just horrible. He was just a horrible employer. He yelled all the time. He berated us in front of other team members. In fact, he even berated us in front of patients. It was just horrible. In fact, it was so bad, I had to start going back to my AA meetings again. And then she proceeded to cry. That might be an extreme example of sharing too much information. So 2 points for thought. What they'll do in the future is probably indicated by what they've done in the past. And if a potential new hire shares too much information, you know that you're probably on the wrong track.
Okay, the second question you kind of dealt with in the case study that you did right at the end, but the question was, I have some team members that could be well described as being in the bottom 20%. I will admit to not being confrontational or dealing well with their performance. That said, how do I go about inviting them to find somewhere else to work?
Great question. So 2 things. There is a great Crown Council Mentor of the Month program that we did within the last 12 months with Dr. Robert Glover. entitled Why Dentists Are Wimps. I highly recommend that if you have not listened to that Mentor of the Month, that you get on crowncouncil.org and go under the training section under Mentor of the Month and look for Why All Dentists Are Wimps. It's got some great suggestions for those who are conflict adverse. So that's suggestion number one. Number two is go back to what we talked about before, which is sit down in a quiet moment and get very clear on your vision, what your purpose is, and what your expectations are of your team. Then call a team meeting and apologize. You're going to start with an apology and say, I have been remiss for not being more clear with all of you on where we're going, why I'm here, and what my expectations are of my team. And so I'm going to take a few minutes to get crystal clear with everyone on where we're going, why we're here, and what my expectations are. And then lay those out. My suggestion is you do that in writing. And then set up individual interviews with your team members to have a specific discussion with them about how they see themselves fitting into your vision, your purpose, and your behavioral norms. More often than not, then those people who are uncomfortable with the vision and the expectations that you've set out, they'll weed themselves out. And if they don't, then it will give you an opportunity to specifically sit down and say, these are the specific areas where there needs to be and has to be improvement if we're going to continue working together. Clarity will clean up a lot of misunderstanding.
Terrific. The last one, you talked about camping trips, and I assume you don't really mean that we're going camping together.
Well, you
What are
could,
some
but
examples?
I don't recommend it. So,
What are some examples that you've seen of good camping experiences?
great questions. So let me give you a variety. Sometimes a great continuing education experience together as an entire team can be a camping experience. So I know a lot of times the clinical team will go to clinical CE and the front office team will go to management continuing education, but periodically it's a good time for the entire team to go together through great continuing education and have that experience together. Let me give you a couple of recommendations. One, we design the Crown Council annual event to be a quote-unquote camping experience. It's an experience for the entire team that gets everybody focused on the relationship that they have with each other and how to work better together as a team. The Total Patient Service Total Immersion course is a camping-like experience for the whole team that focuses on maximizing your case acceptance in your team case presentation protocol. So good continuing education courses together. Next is just simply having a team meeting outside the office. Instead of meeting around the lunchroom table in the office, go someplace different. Go have an experience together. Let me give you an example. Why not go and experience a company that does things really well? Like, for example, there was a team recently that went to the American Girl store that sells the American Girl dolls. Now, it's an amazing experience where they not only they sell merchandise, but they do the doll's hair, they have a doll hospital, they have movies, they have a restaurant. And so the team went through and experienced that entire way that they deliver that experience and that service to their customers. And then they sat down and had a discussion about what's the kind of experience that we give our patients and what do we need to be doing as a team to deliver that kind of experience. Another one might be to go to a really nice restaurant together that not only has great food, but also has great service. Another team I'm familiar with recently did this with a very high-end restaurant, but made arrangements beforehand for the maitre d' to take them on a kind of behind-the-scenes tour of the restaurant and how they pull off their service, how they are able to deliver such great food. So those are just a couple of examples of things you can do. Another one is do something service-oriented together as a team. whether it's to volunteer as an entire team at a local charity clinic that provides charity dentistry in your community, or going on the Crown Council humanitarian excursions to the Dominican Republic, but doing something together that does good and makes the world a better place. Those are just a couple of examples of camping experiences. So with that, I think that's our time is up, and thanks for the questions. Here's our challenge: is great teams in the Crown Council that work well together spend the time to work on the team. They don't just do it by accident, they do it on purpose. Get clear about your expectations, communicate those expectations, dialogue about it as a team, and work together to create the place that everyone wants to work. But it's done on purpose, and it takes the whole team. Thanks for joining us for our webinar today, and I hope that you have a great experience as you implement the action steps that we've talked about today to have a great team that works together harmoniously for the practice objectives that gets great results. Have a great day.
Thank you, Steve. Great webinar. Bye-bye.